Well, hello there, everybody, and welcome back to the Fox Den here on the Fox D Network. I'm your host, Heath Douglas, and today on our show, we have a very awesome and amazing, fantastical person who considers himself a life coach and inspiration to all, and is just an overall fantastic guy himself. Everybody, welcome to the show, Bob DePasquale. Should I say it in the French, or do you just call it DePasquale, or how do you call yourself?
It's actually Italian.
Italian, okay.
Yeah. I think when my ancestors came off the boat, Ellis Island, they changed it from DI to DE. So yeah, I get a little Spanish, a little French. You never know, but it's actually Italian. De Pasquale.
Okay.
And yeah, that's my heritage right there.
Well, that's awesome. I'm going to have to borrow you for some pasta recipes then. I might have to.
Yes. My grandmother was an excellent pasta chef, let me tell you.
Oh, I've always been told that because I had a buddy of mine who he was same thing. His family was Italian too. And his nonna was just, she would make amazing. And it was all handmade. She would never go to the store and buy it out of the bag. She would like flour, wheat. She did it by the book. It was just nothing could touch it.
Yeah, my mom used to hide the cans of tomato paste in the cupboard from my grandmother seeing them because she didn't want to know that she didn't boil down tomatoes and make her own sauce.
Oh.
So it was a big secret in the family. Maybe I shouldn't have shared that.
Oh no! Well, quick, turn off the cameras.
Cut that out. Let's bleep that.
Right. We'll censor that later. We'll just do like, oh, and then my grandmother beep da 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 da. Please wait while it's just. Oh man. Well, anyway, it's great to have you here on the show. A little bit about Bob, and we're going to talk about everything. He's got an amazingly fantastic book, an amazing life story. He's also got a super just inspirational podcast. And everything else about him is just, in terms of what he does to help people, is just above and beyond anything else that we've seen in a long time with a lot of people. But before we get into all that, we're just going to highlight our sponsor, and that, of course, is our network coin, the Fox D coin. Fox D coin is a totally community-driven coin with no pre-mine and no developer's wallet that's keeping the coin held behind a wall. Fox D is a 100% transparent coin that's open to everyone and making it where it's a coin for the people by the people. The unique advantage of Fox D offers what we're utilizing right now, which is the Fox D network, and that gives everybody the opportunity to be seen on our network and gives your content a chance to shine, with your audience growing with you and, of course, with the network. We're always accepting new guests, streamers, and contributors to the network, so if you do want to expand on our brand, you know what to do. Check us out on our website at foxdcoin.com. That is Fox, the letter D, coin.com, where you can download all your wallet, or if you want some coins yourself, you can find it on Craig's 24, Bit Sales, FX, and Free Exchange. So back to you, Bob. So tell us, just starting off, tell us about yourself, kind of your story, where you're from, your humble beginnings, and kind of what ended up making you. Should I call you an inspirational speaker, a motivational speaker? What do you call yourself?
I like to use the term impact maker. That's
very nice.
That's what I call myself when I'm not wearing other hats that I am in my life, a husband and an athlete, hopefully.
Right.
But yes, so impact maker. That's what you can call me. Just hopefully a nice guy. You mentioned it. So humble beginnings. Yes. So I was actually born in New York, and I moved to Florida when I was 3. I've lived here pretty much ever since, other than college. But I think the part of my story that probably make most sense to highlight is when I went back to college, I wanted to spend some more time with my family that I really didn't know. My family was kind of weird for coming down to Florida when I was a kid. They were like, "Why are you going to Florida? We're all New Yorkers," my mom and my dad's side. Anyway, so I wanted to go back to college. I went up to college, and I had an opportunity to play sports at Hofstra University there in Long Island, for anyone who's familiar with the area. And I had an amazing experience over the next couple of months. So I don't know if you've definitely been a young man before. If you're a teenage 18-year-old guy, you think you're invincible, right? You think nothing can stop you. That was me for sure. I thought I couldn't be taken down by anyone. And while I was in training camp playing football up there at Hofstra, I developed an injury early on. The first couple of days of training camp, they thought I had a groin pull. Now, I don't know if you've ever pulled your groin muscle, but you would be surprised how much you use that muscle, like to walk, to sit up. I mean, things that you just don't think about. It was pretty painful, very, very debilitating. And I used to do this. They had me doing this rehab exercise. Picture a 3-wheeled stool that you have to, I had to shimmy across the training room.
Right.
A training room in college is way different what I was used to in high school. In high school, you have like 1 or 2 volunteer people hanging around, and it's probably a 10 by 10 room. Well, this training room is huge. And at any given morning at 6:00 a.m., there's 100 people in there getting treatment and trainers and doctors. It's crazy. So dragging this stool while sitting in it, it was actually very, very challenging, dodging all these people. So at one point, the head trainer stands up and says, "Hey, Bobby, why are you still in here? You need to be back out in the field now." So I went from this invincible, or at least I thought invincible 18-year-old, and the head trainer is calling you out for kind of being a weakling. That was a little bit of a shot to my ego. But long story short, we ended up having a more serious conversation later. I said, "Listen, Rick, this thing is not getting better." He said, "Oh, I'm going to send you to a doctor." And he sent me to a urologist. And ultimately, they ran a bunch of tests over a couple-week period. And my parents were supposed to come up for my first college game, and it was a Thursday. And they came up, and on that day, I had an appointment with the doctor to kind of go over all of these tests. They were landing around the same time that I was in the appointment. So I was in the appointment. My doctor sits me down. Remember, I'm 18. I don't know what's going on. I've just gotten a bunch of sonograms and CAT scans. And he sat me down and said, "Bobby, you're cancerous." And I was like, "You're kidding me." I didn't even know what to say. I was speechless. I couldn't believe it. And so I came out of the appointment not really knowing, kind of in a blur. My mom calls me and says, "Hey, how'd the doctor's appointment go? We're in the car. We're on the way to your uncle's house." And I almost didn't know what to say. I had to tell her. I said, "Mom, the doctor told me I have cancer." And she just was dead silent on the other side of the phone. And I could hear my dad, who knew something was wrong. He's like, "Susan, what's up? What's going on?" And it was unbelievably saddening that period of time. And we got back to my uncle's house. I drove, they met me there, and we shed some tears, and it was just an unbelievably challenging time in life. And a couple of days later, my uncle's best friend, who we didn't know because we lived in Florida, came over the house, and he handed his keys to his car to my parents and said, "Here, Bob and Susan, I cannot believe what you're going through. What your son has just been diagnosed with cancer. Take my card, take it to any doctor's appointments you need. It's going to be crazy." So he left. 15 minutes later, such a nice guy. And we were like, wow, my parents were flabbergasted. They couldn't believe it. So a couple of days go by. My parents had told my doctor told me, "You got to take classes. You're going to have some kind of treatments for your cancer, but you can't just do nothing all day." So I stayed enrolled in my college classes. Monday morning, I had my first college class. I've kind of felt somewhat sense of normalcy. My second class was on the next Tuesday morning. I came out of that class and I went into the cafeteria where, if you ever been, and this is 20 years ago or so, they have one of those tube televisions kind of like bracketed to the corner.
Oh, yes. The big giant ones.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And, it looks, now if you were to look at one of those, it looked like a dinosaur. But anyway, I'm watching television. I'm eating like a breakfast burrito or something, in the school cafeteria, and a plane hits the Twin Towers. So it's why the news is on. And I'm like, wow, that's crazy. So I called my dad and I said, "Hey, Dad, are you watching television?" And he's like, yeah, I saw that. And we're talking for like a minute, and then bam, the next plane hits the other tower. And he's like, "Whoa, you better get in the car and get home. I don't know what's going on." So he's like hopped in the car. Now, I have a master's degree in broadcast journalism. I will never again in my life listen to 9 straight hours of AM radio.
Yes.
It was a 15-minute drive. Typically, it took me 9 hours to drive back to my uncle's house with the towers like burning in the distance. And I actually ran out of gas in my uncle's neighborhood, and we had to push the car into his driveway. And we get it in there, and we all kind of stood in the dining room there, when you enter his house, and we're all looking at each other like, what is going on? This is unbelievable. Well, my uncle was on business in Denver the night before. He actually couldn't get home. So my aunt was trying to get a hold of him, and she's panicking, she was besides herself. Finally, like 5:30 at night, he calls and says, "Hey, I'm stuck in Denver. I would imagine you've been trying to call me. The cell phones haven't worked. I'm okay." And my aunt was like, oh, thank God. Well, come to find out though, his best friend Tim was in the towers that morning. The guy who just gave us the car, and he perished.
Wow.
So that's a really long way of kind of telling you what a really big, impactful event in my life. And it really took me years. It took me 6 months or so to recover physically. I went through my treatments and everything, but it took me years to recover emotionally. And so that story in my life has really impacted me in numerous ways, but has really kind of led me to where I am today.
Wow. That's well, and that's just, first of all, that is amazing about the not just the cancer, but even the 9/11 thing. Cause I think a lot of people, even still to this day, you know, there's always those family members, those friends, dads, uncles, cousins, where, you know, it's like, man, you know, it's so-and-so was supposed to get on, you know, the ABC subway or from Brooklyn to this. And then, you know, next thing you know, they didn't, or they did. And it's just that is incredible. And one thing about, you know, even with your cancer testimony, when you had gotten that, you talked about, you know, you didn't know what to say, you didn't know what to think. Going through that, eventually going through that, getting the recovery, how did that impact you personally once you started to become an impact maker? Like, how did you transition from all that to becoming, like you said, the impact maker, or what most would say, motivational speaker, I guess?
Well, I mentioned it took me a couple of years to really recover emotionally. So physically, I powered through. I thought I would be the greatest cancer patient, just like I thought I'd be the greatest college football player. I thought I'd be the greatest cancer patient you could possibly be. So I listened to everything that my oncologist told me. I mean, I went to sleep when the clock struck 8:30, I was in bed. You know, I woke up at the same time. I drank a specific amount of water down to the ounce. I took all the pills that I was supposed to take. I had to give myself shots, all these things. And I, you know, for that period of time, I thought it was me. You know, I just felt like it was me. I'm going to beat cancer, and it can't handle me. I'm 18-year-old and I'm invincible, like I mentioned.
Right.
But to be honest with you, there were a lot of other powers and things going on behind the scenes there in my life that I just didn't realize at the time. And it really took me years to figure that out. And I have a couple of different stories to illustrate that. And ultimately, it was very, very important that those forces were in my life. And now that I realize that, it's very important to me to support other people, even if they don't know, even if I'm not getting recognition and they're not acknowledging that I'm being of assistance to them, I still think it's important. And you know what? They may never, or it might take 2 years like it took me, but I think we all have gifts and skills that we've been blessed with to help other people. And if we can help accentuate those, the world will just be a better place.
Oh, no, I agree. And I think that's something, especially since, and I've always told people this, is really ever since the age of the internet is, you know, we have kind of become so disconnected in a lot of ways, and we're not like as personal as we should be, to where, you know, we're not getting out there. Like, again, we were talking about like our grandparents, you know, or our family members and our mom and dads, where, you know, back in their days, you used to go out and know every single person on the block. You knew that Miss Marguerite had her little flower shop, and you knew that Steve had this. And so, like you talk about, is where the impact of getting with those people is, it does, when you help other people, it's that, what's that saying? It's the, and I'm probably going to butcher it, but it's that phrase about, like, you know, the best feeling about helping yourself is helping others. I think that's the phrase, you know?
Yeah, I think you got it. I think you nailed it. I think that's a really interesting way of putting it, because one of the things I've learned in my efforts here, you know, hosting the Speaking of Impact podcast and writing a blog and working on a book right now, all those things have really helped me learn lessons about how you got to take care of yourself in order to be able to accentuate, to maximize those things that you have. So let's say, for example, I am a good speaker, right? Well, if I'm exhausted and tired and not in good shape and I don't feel confident with myself, I'm not ultimately going to be able to help people as much, because I'm not as effective as a speaker.
Right,
so
exactly.
You really do have to take care of yourself. I like how you say that.
Well, thank you. Well, and speaking of your podcast as well, which everybody can listen to, it is now, people can find you on iTunes, Spotify, kind of where everything else is, right?
Yes, you name it. Any platform, the Speaking of Impact podcast is up there.
Okay, awesome. So with your Speaking of it now, how did you get into the podcast realm? What made you want to start the podcast, and kind of tell viewers kind of what you talk about on there, kind of what you go over for people, and kind of the general shtick, I guess, if you will, of this impact?
Sure. I wanted to start a podcast for 5+ years, to be honest with you. I got recruited when I was younger. After I graduated college, and the story that I told you, a couple of years after that, I got recruited into the financial industry from broadcasting. I mentioned I have a degree in broadcasting too. And so I kind of didn't scratch that journalistic, podcasting, video, TV type of itch that I had for many years growing up. And so I wanted to start a podcast, but unfortunately my former employer would not allow me to when I was in the financial industry. I still am, but when I had switched to the financial industry. And then the pandemic came last year, and ultimately I kind of gave it one last shot. Hey, can I start a podcast? I can't communicate with anyone. It's just not possible. And they got back to me and they said, yeah, you know what, you can. You've been bugging us for so long. Sure. And the problem was I wasn't allowed to talk about money, which wouldn't have been productive in that career. Right. And so I was a little frustrated at first, but then I realized, Heath, I really just want to do a podcast and talk to people about doing what they love and making a positive impact in the world. There's a million podcasts on money. I don't really think we need another one. And some of them are very good. Some of them, are entertaining. But I want to do something a little bit different. So I started the Speaking of Impact podcast, and my business partner and I have since left our previous firm and started our own company. So I can say more than I was allowed to previously, but I realized that it really isn't the focus. The focus really is positive impact in the world. And so if you want to hear from people who have influence in the world, they're professional athletes, they're executive directors of nonprofits, they're business people who are really making a positive impact using their platform to do good, then we are definitely the podcast for you.
Well, that's awesome. And we will definitely have all the links down there for anybody that wants to. We'll have his website up, so that way you guys can definitely check him out on that. So listen to his podcast and go to his website, and also get his book, which I found really interesting. Is you have is it too early to say it's a New York Times bestseller? Should we say it's on all the Pulitzer Prize winning shops and everything at Barnes and Noble?
A little early, but we can shoot for the stars for sure.
Right. Well, hey, if you shoot for the moon, at least you hit the stars, because there's other planets, 400 billion other galaxies and stuff. So
that's a great thing.
The book is called Personal Finance in a Public World. Now, what's interesting is you talk about not talking too many personal finance podcasts. What is the book about, if not finance, or is it about finance? Like, tell us about what made you write the book, and also kind of what's in the material itself.
In 12 years working with numerous thousands of families, I realized that there's a lot of stress when it comes to money. And I don't believe money is the end game for 99.9% of the people. In fact, I don't think anyone's ever told me all I want is more money. They usually want some kind of freedom. They want to travel. They want to see their family. They want to give it away to charity. Money is a tool.
Sure.
And so that tool, though, unfortunately, can be really stressful. And I understand this because I am the worst handy person you've ever met in your life. So if you picture me using a screwdriver, putting holes in walls and trying to drill things, it's just not a good fit. And it stresses me out. And so it's very, very similar to the people that we deal with over the years. It's not that they're not capable. It's not that they're not smart enough. It's not even so much that they don't have the time. It's that they just don't have the capacity. They're very hardworking people that have other things going on in their life. They have other passions. That's really hard to pull all those things together, and it causes stress. So I said, well, why? What is stressing them out, and how can we solve that problem? And what I found is that overwhelmingly, technology these days is the number one cause of people's stress from a financial perspective. Now, if you think about it, how many times or how much time a day do we spend on our mobile device or our computer? We're talking on a computer right now. And the book is definitely not to bash technology. It's actually to tell people to use technology more wisely and have a healthy relationship with their money and technology. Because the ad space and social media, the way that we consume information these days is so rapid, and it's so targeted.
Oh, absolutely.
It can be very, very distracting. So if you're a reader, if you're a listener, a reader, or someone who really cares about their financial situation, which I find most people do, and maybe you find yourself being a little bit stressed, the book will teach you how to use technology in a positive fashion to help you make wiser money decisions.
Well, that's very good. And you're right. I think a lot of where when people do talk about, using technology and using that to their advantage is, I mean, like we're using right now, is, there is
Mhm.
a very positive impact with the internet that you can have because you can reach literally hundreds of millions of people that, you otherwise have never had the opportunity to do. But in terms of making it work for you is like you were talking about with the podcast, there's so many different books and so many different podcasts on even just how to use a podcast or how to use, marketing and stuff. And so it gets to where it's an overload of information that you're like, where do I start? Where do I begin?
Exactly. No, exactly. There's so much information out there. And, I tell a couple stories in the book about how the media really is much, much different than what it used to be, and how we experience things is more influential. And it's because these algorithms and these computers are able to really feed us what we want. We feed
Mhm.
them we feed them the information and they spit it right back to us. And so you have to take those things into account. But the good news is the technologies that are available for things like investing and budgeting and debt repayment, talk about the coin with which we all are doing. There's a chapter on
Mhm.
cryptocurrency. And so there's a lot of things that technology can do for you and really automate things to help you develop really, really good habits. So if you can have healthy money habits, I guarantee you'll be de-stressed. It's very,
Well,
very
that
important.
Oh, absolutely. And who doesn't need and also I would even say as far as de-stressing yourself is just get off the internet every once in a while. Go outside. See, kind of like our parents told us, get outside and kick that ball. You need to get some fresh air.
You're exactly right. Our parents were wiser than we gave them credit for.
Well, I know. And now we're kind of like, of course, I know a lot of people, because of the whole pandemic thing, a lot of things have been shut down and all that. And kind of also asking about that is how has with the coronavirus and stuff, kind of where were you kind of prior to the pandemic? Where were you during it? And now we're kind of getting out of it with a lot of, the not just vaccines, but just a lot of, people taking care of their health and wellness. How did your business kind of go through that personally with everything going between 2019, 2020, and all the way to now.
Well, our business has changed a lot because of the pandemic. I think
Sure.
some people told us we're foolish, my business partner and I, for leaving our company and starting our own in the middle of a pandemic. So we went through a pretty huge transition. And
Right.
then the book started and all these things kind of came together all at the same time. So in some crazy way, I've been more busy than I ever have, although I don't really feel it because I think a lot of the things I'm doing now are super fulfilling and really I really appreciate that I'm not taking that time for granted.
Sure.
But one thing that really sticks out to me is working in the financial space when crazy things happen like happened last year and people's bottom lines or people's numbers
Mhm.
on paper mind you, but still emotionally related, when things are cut in half or very, very drastically affected, it really kind of throws things up in the air and they don't really know, and it's confusion and causes more stress. And so what we're trying to do now in our new firm is help people have a plan that has some anticipation
Mhm.
in it, right? To understand, to know, to kind of to mitigate those emotional things. We can put all the insurance in place and have all the risk management
Right.
portfolio, but if you don't have that emotional risk management, then I think you're going to struggle. And so for me, I occasional speaking engagements, working for a great organization. My life was
Mhm.
fine before the pandemic.
Right.
I was actually in China the December of 19, January of 2020, because I have
Wow.
family that lives over there.
Oh, okay.
So we came back, my wife and we felt terribly sick a couple of weeks later. Had no idea what it was. The coronavirus
Oh.
wasn't out yet. We were not too far from Wuhan, believe it or not. We were about halfway between Wuhan and Shanghai.
Oh, no.
So I don't want to speculate. I might be patient zero. I don't know if I should broadcast this either on the
Dun,
airwaves here in
dun,
Florida.
dun.
Thankfully, we recovered. We were fine, but our family that lives in Shanghai had to come back.
Mhm.
And so our world was kind of thrown up in the air. My mother had just sold
Sure.
her house, so she was living with us. I had 5 people from China, and my mother-in-law wasn't about to let her grandkids be here in the States and not come visit. So there were 9 of us packed in our house,
Oh my
quarantining,
gosh.
Zoom meetings all over the place. The
Right.
3 kids in school, my wife and my brother and sister-in-law are both teachers. So it was just nuts. So to answer your question, it really kind of threw things for a loop. But to be honest with you, that kind of made me realize, you know what, this is a virtual world. And that really honestly was part of the reason that we led to starting our own company. And so it really threw the business things into a whirlwind. I could no longer speak publicly. I couldn't go to places. So virtual things took over. And, I don't want to say, I don't want to minimize what's happened. We've lost some loved ones.
Sure.
Everyone's affected in one way or another about the pandemic. So I think this is really a terrible time. And I think we need to be responsible for what it is. Mm-hmm. But if you're looking for some silver lining and some blessings within that cloud, for us and my business specifically, it's been the kind of extra oomph and push into the virtual world to be able to use this amazing technology like we're using right now.
No, and that's amazing that you guys have been able to push through that, because unfortunately a lot of businesses have fallen to a lot of this economic disaster and all that sort of stuff. And I want to go back to about you were talking about getting through an economic issue. Is a lot of people do have savings and bonds and finances and stocks that even if a lot of that falls through, they might have like, okay, my stocks didn't work, but I got my bonds didn't work, I have this. But the emotional side of it, the emotional problem, because even not just now, but you look back what happened in 2008 when the stock market fell out. A lot of people, unfortunately, went through huge depression. Some committed suicide. And so I want to touch on that. Is how would you give some advice to people, not just financially, but even through life, like what you went through with cancer? How do you prepare for an emotional impact before it comes, and prepare yourself? Because we all know how to prepare for a financial impact, but how do you prepare for an emotional impact?
Well, one of the things that I talk about in my book is habits. And if I can give a couple book recommendations,
sure.
I will. One of the books that I read is called Atomic Habits by a gentleman by the name of James Clear. And it really talks, not financially related, but a lot of it applies to the financial world. And it really talks about developing great habits for yourself. And one of the things that it talks about is the plateau of latent potential. What that means is you can start practicing or participating in a certain activity or trying to learn something new. And there's a period of time where you may not see any progress. Although you're making progress, you just can't feel it yet, because there's this plateau that you have to get to be able to really experience it. And my example with that is playing the drums. A couple of years ago, I took up the drums, and I've always had a little bit of rhythm.
Cool.
Never had any ability to play an instrument, or I can't hear a note or sing one to save my life, but I had a little bit of rhythm. And I was practicing the drums, I don't know, for a few months. And I told my wife, I was like, I'm really not getting any better. I mean, I kind of enjoy it. It's fun, but I can't really take that next step and do any of the things that some of these YouTube videos are telling me to practice or play along with songs. And then one day, it was one night, I was playing along, and all of a sudden it hit me. I figured something out. I can't even explain it. I screamed. I was like, honey, it's here. And she's like, what? I was like, I hit the plateau of latent potential.
Yes.
So I bring that up because I read a bunch of books, but that one specifically, for anything in life, whether it's financially related or playing the drums or some other skill, hobby, new job that you have, you really got to stick through it until you get to that point, because it's an amazing jump and it's an amazing feeling. So when it comes to kind of mitigating emotional stress, great habits are really, really important. And one of the things I talk about all the time with people, the people I work with, is gratitude and being appreciative of the things that you have in life. And what, after what I went through there in 2001, I'm way more appreciative of the things that I have in life, in life itself, than I ever was. And during that 2-year period I keep mentioning, I was kind of grateful that I was alive, but I really hadn't practiced it enough. And I hadn't reached that plateau to really understand what it means. So I always tell people to start developing a morning habit of your gratitude time. Everyone's different. It could be quiet time. It could be listening to music, could be writing things down, could be dictating it, Word document, whatever. But start with 5 minutes and just think of the things that you're grateful for. Your family, hopefully you're healthy, your home, your car, technology, like whatever it might be. The simple things that you just take for granted, your toothbrush. I had a kid talk to me. My wife's a kindergarten teacher, I mentioned. I had a kid talk once about how thankful they were for their toothbrush. And your first reaction is like, oh, cute kid. I've had a million toothbrushes. But if you think about it, there's people in this world that don't have a toothbrush.
Yes.
And so that's the number one thing. And don't practice that for a week, for 5 days, and call me and say, hey, Bob, listen, I don't feel immediately better because
right.
You have to practice that and reach the plateau of latent potential. So that's one thing for emotional stresses, to really help you be grateful for the things that you have. So when the crazy things do happen, you don't concentrate on just that and drive yourself into a spiral. I can't tell you that emotional things aren't going to happen, but if you can concentrate on the things that you're grateful for, I think you're just a little bit more equipped to handle those tough times.
No, and that's absolutely right. I think of it like, building a foundation with a house. You don't start with the roof and then move to the plumbing and then go to the, electricity. You have to have that foundation of where, when you're actually, like you said, you appreciate the things that you have, and you do that, you build up from that, and it creates really this sense of, wow, my life is not as bad. It's not as horrible as, kind of everything around me.
Exactly. No, right with you, man. Totally agree. The people I know, that families that I've worked with over the years who are the most emotionally stable are the ones that really appreciate each other and whatever it is that they have in their life, whether it's a big business that has made their family wealth, or maybe it's just other connections. Maybe it's the places that they volunteer. They're just very, very thankful for the things that they have. And when the tough times happen, they understand that there's no way avoiding them, but they're comfortable talking with each other and talking with me and my staff. It's just really important for them. It's very, very important to be grateful.
Well, that's awesome. And now, how long have you been doing, in terms of, well, let me ask this, in terms of doing, the many years that you've been doing the, impact and impactfulness, I guess I would say, is what are some of the positive, because I'm curious to know about a lot of, when motivational speakers, they'd have these stories like, oh man, I had this one person come back and have this story. Do you have any sort of that stories where someone's come back and said, man, I did your program, I did this, and it really helped me out? Do you have any, amazing stories like those as well?
Well, one of the things that I can think of specifically, and this wasn't actually a client or anyone that I worked with, but it's just a really impactful story for me. I like to share it. So my wife and I met through a mission organization.
Oh, cool.
And we still participate in it every year, except for the pandemic year. It's kind of a bummer last year.
Sure.
We take high school and college age students on this trip every year. And part of the trip involves cycling. And I'm not, honestly, I don't even really I biked to middle school. It was a drag, 1.5 miles. I'm not really into biking, but something about this organization and this group is called Spoke Folk, spokefolk.org. And it's a really, really amazing trip that really helps people, teaches people to be just better missionaries in their daily lives, and also builds relationships like you can't experience. And one of the times we were on this trip, one of these young ladies that was with us, super nice girl. Speaking of talented, she was a drummer, so that's probably why.
Oh, so you guys probably connected.
Yeah, well, this was way before I even played the drums. She probably inspired me. But so she woke up one morning, and I maybe didn't sleep well or just didn't feel good, and it was like, listen, I can't get on the bike today. I'm not going to do it. And I said, well, what do you mean you can't get on the bike? You can get on the bike. And I was like, so what's the specific issue? And she listed off a couple of things. I'm sore, my head hurt, whatever.
Yeah.
And I'm not encouraging people to push through major illness.
But
I had this little short conversation with her, and I said, listen, I think you're great. It's been amazing having you along on this trip. There's some gifts and skills that you have that I believe that you haven't even noticed that you have yet. And you're an excellent communicator. And there's someone in this group wants to talk to you today while they're on the bike. And I don't know what it was. I think 3 or 4 other people had tried to force her to ride, and it wasn't. They were kind of being adversarial, and I just kind of lifted her, built her up a little bit, and she got. I walked away. Turns out she got on. Someone later said, "Hey, did you know that she was on the bike today?" And I was like, "Yeah, I kind of expected it after talking to her. I don't want to give myself too much credit." And then totally unsolicited, later we were in the group, we were sitting around in a circle, and everyone was kind of sharing highlights for the day, things that they were grateful for. And she raised her hand and said, hey, you know what, Bobby, you said a couple words to me that were the most powerful words of my life. And you said that I had a purpose. And it was so moving. Like, it was totally unsolicited. She just said a couple little things. And at that moment, it dawned on me, it was like, wow, just giving people support and showing them that you believe in them is such a powerful thing. So you asked for a story. That one always sticks out the most to me because it took the least effort. but it was one of the most powerful.
That is, wow. That's, and that's true about, talking about even just little things like that. Because in our lives, we get so wrapped up in work and school and this and that. And it's the little, when they say that, saying, stop and smell the roses, it's the little things. I think that is one of the biggest things to us nowadays is, we're so wrapped up in, like we were talking about, our phones, our computers, or this and that. And we really don't stop to talk to people and ask them, hey, how's your wife? How's your son? How's your daughter? Because when you even start with that stuff and you encourage people, even if they're going through a rough time, even though you may not know every single detail, just giving them that little bit of a nudge can actually give them that opportunity to go like, you know what, I can do this.
Absolutely, man. I love how you say that. Just give them the little nudge. You would be surprised how powerful you can be in someone's life. I had someone tell me once, you may not be able to change the world, but you can change the world for one. And it's absolutely true. We're all not going to start a world-changing nonprofit and solve world hunger. And, those are great causes. I encourage anyone to get involved in them. But don't feel like you're not worthy if you're not a public figure. You can change just simple little things. Telling someone that they're worthy, opening the door, please and thank you. I think a lot of people will be surprised how powerful they are.
Yes. And it's always, especially now with the holidays coming up, Thanksgiving, Christmas, is something that even for me personally, that always kind of, I guess for lack of a better term, it irks me in a way, is it's always where for some reason, from December 1st to December 31st, we always have that thing where, like you're talking about, you impact people's lives of maybe not giving a gift, but even showing up with candies or this or that, and, just the holiday spirit. But then January 1st comes and we just go back to our old grumpy selves. And you're like, no, we need to take that same holiday spirit, but maybe not so much keeping your tree up 24/7. I'm not encouraging it. If by the way, if your lights are still up from last year, just keep them up. Christmas is already here.
Yeah.
But, taking maybe not so much the holiday part of it, but that spirit and the impact that, we have of being able to impact people on like, hey, man, hope you're doing good. Merry Christmas. But instead of Merry Christmas, man, have a good day, great day, that sort of thing, because it adds up over time. Like you're talking about being in that habit of where you feel good about telling other people about your day. They feel good about, and it builds up from there like a puddle.
Absolutely. I can't agree with you more. Kindness is contagious, my friend.
Well, maybe we should be passing kindness around instead of vaccines. Maybe because some of these people online, for years have been just the toxicity of it all. My gosh, we need to start injecting some happiness, because I'll tell you, man, I think that's one of my things personally, and maybe you've experienced this as well. We all have in a way. Is the toxicity of the online internet stuff is really, people don't take jokes anymore. People don't put emotion into things anymore. People aren't just positive about stuff. You look at the news, it's like everything is just nonstop, just war and violence and death. And I'm like, where's the stories about the puppies being saved from the fire? Like, where's those stories?
Yeah, where's the cat ran up the tree and the firefighter chased him down, right? No, the toxicity is out there. Here's the way I look at it. The more people that we have a chance to communicate, the more great opportunities that we have to do good, right? And so that's why, for me, the internet's a very, very positive thing. The problem or the disconnect I find is people are very defensive because we've turned networking into a competition. Now, I am one of the most competitive people. I don't say that as a badge of honor or anything. It's just my nature.
Sure.
Playing a board game, growing up playing sports. I due to my medical history, my wife and I don't have any children, but I'm the type of dad that if I had a 15-year-old son, and I would probably be dunking on him in the backyard. But I know what it's like to be competitive when it comes to things that competition is designed for. But what happened is when you have an Instagram page and you got people fighting over who's got the most followers and who's got the best pictures, people start getting super defensive. So you made the point about the people don't take jokes anymore, because I think their first reaction is I have to defend myself because I want to make sure that I'm supporting my image, whether it's vanity or not, whether it's truthful. They got to make themselves look as good as possible. And we've grown up, right? For most of my adult life, the internet has been around. or all of my adult life, and for most of my adult life, all those other platforms and apps have been around. We've grown up expecting to present ourselves the best way possible, right? It's one thing to in the morning to do your hair or to take a shower, but it's another thing to take 15 different pictures and select the best one to put on Instagram so that everyone thinks you're gorgeous. It's just a different atmosphere.
Right? Exactly.
So
no, and you're right. And you know, with even like when your self-worth is that is the age of the internet, is where, you know, we're looking so much at the vanity of our outside that we're not really looking on our inside. And we do, like you said, those positive affirmations. You know, you take that 5 minutes every day to be like, man, what am I thankful for? What do I have inside of myself that I should be happy for? Because what we're doing, I think, a lot of times is we take this false facade. I mean, you look at how many filters there are on Instagram and Facebook that, I mean, my gosh, you can make yourself not even look close to yourself. And so when you're personifying that fake self, you're almost personifying the fact that it's a false inside. And so when you don't have a real inside, you know, truthfulness to yourself, you do get, like I said, that foundation. It's not built on concrete. It's not built on steel. It's not, you know, strong. It's just kind of built on sand, muddy water type of thing. And so you eventually, like, once you start building the house, then it kind of all crumbles down, like when an economic thing happens, or when you go through a divorce or a death, or, you know, it doesn't stand up to that test of time.
I like how you said about the inside and the outside thing. I think that's super important. I think the way we present ourselves, if we want to be an impact maker, I talk about this on my blog a lot. If we want to be an impact maker, we need to present ourselves in a good light. But at the same time, if we don't believe what we're working on or doing from the inside, then it's just not going to be truthful. It's going to seem disingenuous. So there really is an important balance there. I think that what I encourage people to do is simplify things. The internet and the technology are great because what they enable us to do is to gather information immediately. Where there's a shortcoming, or where we get into trouble, is we are overwhelmed, we're overstimulated. And this is somewhat anecdotal, but I know there's data on this. And, you know, some of the stuff I write about in my book too, about how many swipes and clicks we have per day on our devices. But I encourage people to simplify things. And you got to start with the most important stuff first. And the most important stuff, I can't tell you what that is. You have to figure that out. So what I always tell people to do is, I said, start with a list. And what I've found is that the most driven people have the largest lists. The more aggressive you are by nature and your personality, your list is bigger. And it can be really, really hard to pare that list down. And you might have 50 different things. Usually it starts with friends and family, but then it starts going off into other things. And it might take a week of every day just addressing this list for a couple minutes. And it could be 5 minutes, similar to the gratitude time, but pare that list down. And within a week or so time, you should be around 2 to 5, 3 maybe things on that list. And then spend more time thinking and doing those things than all of that other stuff. And just simplify your life. It seems easier said than done, but if you can do that, if you can figure out those couple big rocks, I'll take this example from the business world. I heard someone once say that they use this example. I heard multiple people use this example, actually. You could probably look it up. So if you think about, picture like a glass cylinder, something that you can see and that you're going to fill with stuff, right? You have rocks. Picture you have big boulder type of things. You have smaller little pebbles, and then you have sand. What we tend to do in our world is there's a million things coming at us, and all these different things we're thinking about, and we're just pouring sand, a bunch of little kernels of sand into that. What we should do instead in the business world, now I'm likening this to our personal life too, but in the business world, it's like, what's the most important rock, the biggest thing that you have to get done this week in your business to be successful? You got to make sure that rock gets in that cylinder, in that glass first. Because if you start filling up with sand, you're not going to be able to fit the rock in. Get the rock in, then work on the pebbles that you can kind of fill around the rock, and then pour the sand in, and it'll fill everything else in. Because if you do it the other way, it doesn't work. So the same thing with your personal life. Find those 3 things that are very, very important to you. like I said, it could be friends and family. It could be your faith. It could be, a cause, a charitable cause that you really care about. It could be maybe a good example for my family is that my cousin has cystic fibrosis. My uncle took up a cause many, many years ago, and it's been his number one for 20, 30 years now, is raising money for cystic fibrosis. And I know that brings him joy and fulfillment. So you got to get those rocks in the glass first in your personal life, and then the other things will fall in place. And then what I found is that when you get those, you develop the habits to prioritize those rocks, you can start finding a couple other rocks to put into your life. So, for example, going back to the gratitude time, once that gratitude time becomes habitual, it's not something that you have to set a reminder for, or you have to remember to do it, or you find yourself forgetting occasionally. Once it's just every morning, you wake up, the first thing you do before you turn your phone on and do all that other stuff and search Twitter, you just have the gratitude time. Then you can bring something else into your life, another rock, because it's now become habitual. So practice things repeatedly until they become habitual and you get to that plateau of latent potential, and it's much easier to fill your life with more important rocks.
Well, and that's awesome. And I've heard something to the effect of that like you said, the rock thing, but that I like the way you put that spin on that. That's really cool.
Yeah, you can't pile stuff. The rock ain't going to fit in there if it doesn't touch the bottom. Put it that way.
Yes.
You can't have stuff underneath it.
Well, and I hope that like people that they take away from that, from any of this, that, the foundational thing, like you're talking about, is, don't keep throwing sand, because, and if you find any rocks, I would say try to find some gemstones, maybe some rubies, diamonds,
nice ones,
try to throw those in there as well.
Find some nice stuff to
right.
Look
Exactly.
At, your birthstone, right?
Well, I mean, you got to find, because like with the rocks, it's like, sure, put a nice, limestone, put bedrock, sure. But, find like the little gemstones in life that, make you happy, that, do actually like bring that fulfillment of like, hey man, this is when my son was born, or, my daughter graduated high school. Cause those are those little moments that, stick in there and you're like, hey, this is something I can hold on to.
Absolutely. I think the people who have found those things in their life, in some cases, they can get a little overworked. So I don't want to make it seem like you should spend 80 hours a week doing one thing or two things. So you got to be careful. There's a fine line. But I think the first step is identifying those things first. And then if you get to the point where you feel like you're putting a little too much time in, then you can consider kind of scaling back a little bit, recharging.
Yes. And even like you're talking about on that list is, you can list off a million things, but you need to find those 2 or 3 things that, like, what is it really that really makes me joyful? What is it really? Because I mean, you could say my car, but I'm like, well, I'm going to get a new car every 5-10 years, whereas, my son, my daughter, my wife, my husband, those are the actual bedrocks of, hey, this person's going to be around my life forever. So, definitely cling on to that more than anything else.
For sure. And one of my favorite things to do is ask people that question. And I usually get 2 different responses. The first response is, no one's ever asked me that before. And then the second response is, I know exactly what it is. I'm 100 million miles an hour. And and their eyes light up, right? And they're both interesting examples, because in the second one, I can just ask them more questions about it. In the first one, it's almost really emotional for them, because could you imagine if no one ever asked you what's really important to you? I mean, when you were younger, I mean, I remember my parents, I was an only child, so I was a bit spoiled.
Right.
But my parents would ask me, well, what do you want to do? What's important to you? Do you like that? Is that enjoyable? I think somewhere along the lines, it became bad to ask people what they really want or what's most important to them.
Right.
Because they're used to going to work and being told what to do. They're used to be going to their group and being, they're used to going to their kids' games and practices and stuff, and whatever the kids got to get done, you got to take them there. In some cases, I've heard some sad stories about some people in their faith community feel like they're being told what to do. And it's terrible. But if you can sit down and just literally look someone in the eye and say, what's really important to you? It can be emotional. It can be a little bit overwhelming at first, but it's very, very freeing. They get a chance to actually sit there and talk about it. I mean, Heath, I've sat in front of couples that have been married for 35, 40 years. and ask them that question, and they look at each other and they're like, why have you never asked me that before?
Oh my gosh.
And it's really tough. And in some cases, I ask one of the spouses, and that I learned I got to be a little careful doing that, but it's really important to ask people that. I think even if it's a stranger, like go to the supermarket and they're ringing up your groceries. The lady at the checkout line, one time I said, how are you doing? And she said, oh, I'm doing okay. And I was like, I could say, you're not doing too good. And she was like, yeah, I've been a little bit sick and the COVID and my family. I was like, well, I hope everything's okay. What's really important to you right now in life? And I don't want to say she was like crying or anything, but she definitely like got a little bit choked up.
Sure.
Told me about, a little bit about her grandmother. So just those little things mean a lot to people, right? You may not be able to change the world, but you could change it for one person just by asking them what's important to them.
Well, and I think, like I said, we definitely need more of that in this world, and breaking out of our internet space, getting back out there, even as everything's starting to open back up, really get back there and be back to being, what our parents and grandparents went through of, knowing your neighbors, knowing who, lives 2 blocks down from you, because you may find out more about that person than you thought. That it's like, hey, we got a lot in common. Hey, like, you can feed off of each other, get better days and have better moments, and not just, hey, we're stuck in this little world of our job, school, home. That's it. Like, no, branch out, find other stuff, get connected, really.
Yeah. So do we have a minute? I can tell you a somewhat embarrassing story.
Sure. Yeah. We can wrap it up with a story.
So my next door neighbor, we lived in the home that we live in now for, I want to say 7 years.
Oh,
and
cool.
I don't know, 6 months ago, maybe it was now, maybe a little bit more, less than a year. Absolutely.
Right.
We heard some kind of a commotion at the neighbor's house next door. And the next morning we went over there and we found out that this lady, sweetest lady, had been living the same person. We thought that the house was sold or she passed away or something happened and some young group bought it, was partying all night long.
Right.
Not at all. She's lived there for 30 years or something, or as long as the house was built. And we had never met in 7 years, not even talked to our next door neighbor.
God,
and I told my wife, I was like, this is terrible. Like, this is not the way I preached about living life. I mean, this is
right.
So if that's an encouragement to people, get out there. If you don't have a dog, then just go for a walk. You don't have to walk your dog to meet your neighbor. Go knock on their door and just say, hey, how are you doing? And now she's a really good friend of ours, and she brought us over a little gift a couple weeks.
Oh, how sweet!
And now it's funny. Now I see her driving in the neighborhood all the time. Like, how do I suddenly recognize her? It's like when you get a new car, you see the same model.
Yeah, I was gonna say that. That's hilarious.
Yeah, I'm a little embarrassed to say that I never talk to my next door neighbor for 7 years. But now, I wouldn't say we talk all the time, but now whenever I see her, we wave and say hi. So, just reaching out and talking to people is something that, it's kind of become uncomfortable for some of us, especially during the pandemic, right? But there's nothing says, I appreciate you like a good smile, hello, and maybe a handshake once we get past this pandemic.
Absolutely. Well, Bob, thank you so much for coming on. Wonderful words of inspiration. And again, folks, we will have all the links to his stuff, so you can definitely check him out on his podcast, his website, all that good stuff. Bob, again, thank you so much for coming on and inspiring the masses, as it were.
Heath, it's been a great conversation. Love what y'all are doing at the Fox D Network. Check them out. I appreciate the platform here. Everyone get out there and do something great for someone today.
All right, awesome. And you folks have a great rest of your morning, evening, noon, night, or wherever it is in the world that you are watching. Thanks so much for dropping by, guys. Have a